It is Avowed by Obsidian Entertainment, which on paper is a game that I should, by all rights, adore. But nothing about this marketing campaign had me excited for the game. Told me that Microsoft thought they had a good game on their hands. It felt like the kind of thing that they were just going to let come out a little bit under the radar. They've burned themselves with some of their first-party games in the last 12 to 24 months with games like Redfall. So it felt like it was getting a little bit of the, let's just let it quietly launch and see what happens. And so I kind of went into it with a bit of trepidation. However, I do love fantasy games. This is set in the, I was going to say Path of Exile.
Pillars of Eternity?
The Pillars of Eternity setting. This is the first-person game in the Pillars of Eternity setting. And it is an action RPG with melee combat, spell casting, and actually some ranged weapons as well, bows, but guns. And it plays a lot like the Outer Worlds, but this setting for me is much more approachable. It's much more Elder Scrolls than Fallout / whatever Outer Worlds was trying to be. A little more kind of cheeky. This is
Outer Worlds was Fallout in space.
Fallout in space, basically. Yeah. Whereas Avowed here is a fantasy game that takes itself seriously. It feels very BioWare. It feels very Elder Scrolls. And those inspirations, in part, make it feel a little bit dated, but also are really comforting. And it's actually, this first kind of few hours that I've played, been really impressive. I'm really loving the combat, which is the core of the game, and it's important that they get that right. But more than that, I'm impressed by the storytelling. The execution is really polished. And while a lot of the systems feel like they're maybe not bringing too much new to the table, the sum of all of its parts is actually really, really cool. And I don't want to. I have more affection for it than I thought was possible. Like, I actually think I kind of love this game a little bit. And I saw it was getting... So the reason I actually became interested in playing it at all was because it was getting 8s and 9s from, not like the main outlets, but there were some people that it was like, okay, I've seen your opinions before, and the fact that you really like it is promising to me. And so I was like, I actually paid the $20 on top of the Game Pass to play it a few days early because I wanted to play it over the weekend when I had some time. And I do not regret spending that extra money at all.
I mean, this is coming from the guy who just forked out for Pokemon cards, so...
Totally. I spend my money uselessly everywhere, but I refuse to buy games when I've already paid for them on Game Pass. But here we are. I'm so impressed.
Story impressive? Or
Story is pretty generic fantasy, but I think all fantasy kind of feels generic in just its writing these days, but it's not uninteresting. You are an envoy of the gods. So you are a chosen one, special, and you set out into the world. There's in all those things that make fantasy games great. It's a reflection of society in a way that's really wears racism, classism, all of the isms really on its sleeve up front, and addresses things, in a way that has that layer of sophistication that isn't like, oh, we're actually talking about real world issues. We're talking about a step back from real world issues, so you can talk about interesting things with that little shield up, which is nice, and makes like conflict between characters really interesting. Something that I heard and haven't seen, the latest Dragon Age maybe fumbled a little bit in putting some like landing, talking about serious things in a fantasy setting where you have so much freedom to actually just like attack things head on and in earnest. And that does it here. This character here is with you from really early in the game, and it is voiced by the same voice actor who did Garrus Vakarian. So there is something like I cannot undersell the value of that in it feeling really warm and welcoming.
Romance me.
I've spent 100 hours with that voice over my shoulder, right?
Yeah,
in
wonderful.
playing through Mass
But you
Effect.
can't
so.
romance them, can you?
I
No,
don't. I
believe
don't
so.
know.
I don't think so,
I haven't gotten to a point where that's
Ooh.
seemed to be an option. You can definitely.
This is you?
This is you.
Oh, this is someone
Well,
else's
this is
footage.
me. Should we play the clip that introduces
Oh, is there
my
the classic reveal of
my
the character
character.
creator coming to life?
Yeah.
A Barjo moment, some might even call
There's
the...
a Barjo moment. There's a
Oh,
Barjo
God.
moment. Because
So you went
I
to
gotta
hell.
find it. Hang on, it's not working.
Okay, that's right. The character creator is detailed, and because you are this chosen by the gods, you have a physical affectation that represents the god, and it's kind of like this floral coral
It's a little
growth.
clicker.
You become a clicker, yeah. But you've got a bunch of options for headdress and cheeks and stuff. Crank
So
that
this-
volume.
This is me to you. Wow.
Let's play it one more time from the top.
A
Because,
god gave you that face.
Oh, perfect. Have you got an inverted nose?
it's just in a lot. It's a
just an
sunken
innie.
nose, and
Yeah.
the tattoos are kind of hiding it, and the scarring as well.
wow.
I've seen Barjo's creation. I think you win.
I think mine is more hideous than Barger's, and
Yeah.
he did a really good job of making something disgusting.
Oh, you
but I
can
played
just
with
have
color a bit more.
gun?
You can have guns. The way that the combat system works is that you get, and it's not something that I find really cumbersome in a lot of RPGs is the idea of upgrades, the idea of like even in a Diablo, it's like, oh, I need to get the best drop, or I need to get rare drops, or I need to grind for the gear to get the next version of this thing. In this, you can kind of, you're collecting materials and upgrading the one weapon that you're holding.
Yeah, cool.
So you just basically level it up 3 times and it goes to the next tier, and then you level it up 3 more times and it goes to the next tier. So
Right.
there's a good, it seems so far like there's a reasonable pacing to you leveling up the gear that you're using. Another interesting thing about the combat is you have 2 active, well, you have 1 at a time active, but you have 2 weapon slot builds running simultaneously, and both left and right-handed. So you can have, and my character now has sword and board, basic, boring, so sword and shield. But then in my other set, in my main set, and I'm mostly playing a mage, is I have a wand for my spell casting, and I also have a tome in my offhand. So I can access, by holding the right mouse button, I can access my tome spells and use my mana to cast spells out of my tome as well as from my wand. And so I've got 2 sets of dual wielding going
Does
on.
leveling them up, like, are you not at a hindrance now that you're trying to level up spellcasting while you're trying to do, physical melee sword and board upgrades as well? That doesn't split your upgrade points or whatever the management of that is?
No, the upgrading the individual. I mean, there is some crossover, but there doesn't appear to be between those sets. Like, I think there
Okay.
would be between a great sword, a 2-handed sword, and my single-handed sword, my one-handed sword. But the materials for my 2 spellcasting things, I think there's some crossover, and sword and board, there's like you need
Sorry,
iron
but I mean, like,
chunks and
you're
stuff.
upgrading 2 sets entirely.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's no...
but no individual slots.
Yes.
So my wand and my grimoire separately, my sword and my shield separately.
Yeah, okay,
It's
right.
not like that's a
There's no currency.
class.
You're not upgrading and one over the other. It's, going up separately. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The
and-
spellcasting looks, and I've heard, by all accounts I've heard, is like some of the most satisfying in any first-person game that has magic wielding, which is famously like tricky to make tactile and interesting and feel like it actually has some hit to it.
Yeah.
And-
There's like heat seeking to some of the spells, but some of them are like just like a
Force push.
like a cast, like you burn the ground in front of you and it lasts for X amount of seconds, so you want to like hold it on the enemy. There's more spells to unlock. There's like traps and then snares and stuff like that. It's not so detailed into skill trees and stuff.
Lost any interest to move here?
Yeah, the footage hasn't paused.
No, I know. I'm
probably
Pete's
doing a
Pete's
handstand
just
at this
gone.
point.
He's gone out of his chair.
Great.
Maybe you left.
That's when I did the handstands. And then you've got abilities attached to being godlike.
Yeah.
But yeah, the range combat is really fun, and managing the mana is really cool. And then when you get into a situation where you need to get into melee combat, there's a good counter system. And
Ooh, yes, please.
yeah, totally. It's It's actually really cool. There's only like 4 skill trees, so it's not overwhelming. None of this is overwhelming, which I love. It's simple, effective, detailed.
You said almost like at the start, kind of comforting. Like it's almost feels like a fallback into a style of game that is
and
that
it's-
Obsidian style.
It's freaking beautiful as well. Like
That is true.
Where are we? Like just in an underground cave, and it's just. I mean, that's the beauty of making a fantasy game is you are, and Destiny achieves it by being science fantasy. Like you can just create worlds that are just magic to be in.
I also appreciate that, obviously pulling from the Pillars of Eternity universe and lore, there's something nice knowing that this is drawing from another source material that therefore everything is grounded in a pre-established. To be fair, I don't know what the history of Pillars of Eternity are. Like that could just be someone pulling fantasy bullshit out of their ass. But at the same time, it's nice that it feels like it's earned rather than, now let's make up a race here or a city here or a weird, funny sounding language here. It's like there's more to this universe.
100%. And it lets them do some world building and subtle storytelling because they know their lore. It's well established that even for me, who I played a bit of Pillars of Eternity 1, I didn't finish it, and I didn't play a Pillars of Eternity 2. Or maybe I played Pillars of Eternity 2 and not 1. I can't really remember. But I definitely didn't like buy into the lore in that way. But I'm familiar with some of the stuff, and everything else just feels like the kind of thing that you want out of a fantasy game, which is it believes in its own world.
That's it, yeah.
And you don't need to tell me everything. I just need to be aware that, this feels so real and lived in and understood by the world around me.
And I just want to ask, there's one thing where it's like when you have conversations or there's dialogue or there's subtitles, there's like a glossary thing you can like hover over certain words.
So that's something
and
that
stuff.
is so brilliant
I
and
wish that
comes
was
from
in
Pillars of
so many other
Eternity
games.
and those isometric games where it's like there's keywords, and with a mouse and keyboard you would click on those in an isometric like dungeon crawly kind of game. Like, what does that mean? What does this like adjective mean in the context of combat? What does this mean? What does this mean? And as people are just throwing names at you, you can go like, lore, more detail, please, on that word, that character, that
Final Fantasy
space.
16 had a really similar
Oh,
thing to that
brilliant.
as well.
I
which
just- 'cause
made
I
it
just-
so much easier to
I
understand.
just went back and
everything.
finished The Witcher 3, and by the end, I was actively laughing at conversations people were having where they were like, that'll be Garathan from the Nathan phone. And I'm just like, mate, I don't know any of this.
What do you mean?
Exactly. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it really is strange to me how little Microsoft is talking about this. And I wonder if they just want to see if it becomes a sleeper hit. And I know there's like some reasonably middling critical reception, I guess. There's like some of the, I think IGN gave it a 7. Surprise. As they do. But some of the, I am way more aligned with like, I'm only 5-6 hours in. I'm feeling like it's more aligned with the 8.5-y kind of crowd where it's like, it is like, there is, it's beautifully executed, but it isn't really delivering anything new.
I was going to say,
so
it's not overly ambitious in all its systems. It does them all really well by what it looks like. But
I think I thought that, and I didn't say I don't want to say that it's under ambitious, because you can have a conversation here that goes for 25 minutes of performed dialogue. Like, it is not under ambitious in how much story it's put in here, in how its combat systems are intricate and work together. It's just not doing anything particularly new.
Sure.
So I think that's why people are finding it hard to put this on a pedestal where it might be considered in the realms of Game of the
Where's
Year.
the
where it is
standout
a
mechanical thing
reasonably
it does
beautifully executed
that
thing.
it's
Yeah.
brought to the table that nothing else has done before that? If
Yeah.
it doesn't have that these days, it's hard to grade above like a 7 or 8 because it's like, we have seen this all before, but it's done so bloody well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I am so impressed.